Indigo Park is the latest game in the Mascot horror genre that's taking notes from the likes of Poppy Playtime, Garten of Banban, and Bendy and the Ink Machine. And before anyone gets insulted that I dare compare Indigo Park to Garten of Banban, that's pretty much how Unique Geese started this whole concept in the first place, recreating Garten of Banban and deciding that instead of, stepping on the toes of the developers of Garten of Banban, would make his own IP. And that's how Indigo Park came about. But what do I think of it? Now, I can't compare it to Bendy and the Ink Machine, I straight up haven't played that one, but compared to Poppy Playtime and Garten of Banban, it's honestly the strongest chapter 1 of the trio. The first chapter, which is free by the way, is less than an hour long, yet a whole lot has been packed into it. You go around exploring the park while Rambley the raccoon acts as your guide, which the downtime parts of the game, in between the big encounters, yes there's more than one, had some of my favourite and least favourite parts of the game. Rambley's interactions with Lloyd, for instance, were really funny, and honestly, Rambley in general just has a lot of personality, coupled with the cute design animated by Jake Neutron, who as always has done another stellar job, coupled with the voice acting, honestly makes Rambley an immediately likeable character, which means that the likely inevitable betrayal in like chapter 3 or 4 is going to be doubly gut-wrenching. The reason that I suspect the betrayal is because, well, Rambley doesn't seem wholly honest with his intentions, and with that insecurity of being alone for so long, I get the feeling that we're gonna see a Monica situation crop up here. Not quite as disturbing, but one where Rambley is gonna do anything he can to, well, get his way. Now, on the aforementioned least favourite parts of this downtime, honestly, I'm not as familiar with this genre as some people, but man, am I starting to see some tropes just from these 3 games. Like, when you get teased the first time by a monster peering back at you, yeah, that can be kinda scary. Like when I found out Huggy Wuggy was staring at me the entire time, it kind of did spook me, and did have me questioning what was gonna happen. But now that I'm familiar with the format, that this is just a tease before the big climax, I did not buy into the fear at all whenever Molly would appear, especially because the game really loves having Molly appear. Like, it got a bit comical at times because I just knew this isn't the time. Molly's not going to chase us yet. And because it was so obvious, I just knew that I could just run in the direction of Molly and she would likely despawn before I got to her. So I had nothing to worry about. Honestly, at this point, I would love if Chapter 2 or Chapter 3, depending on how far in development Chapter 2 is. Honestly, I would love for one of these future chapters to just fake me out. Have it appear like it's one of those fake out segments, then if you run too quickly, you get killed. I just need to feel like there's going to be some level of danger to these, because I can't keep being expected to be scared by the tease that later in the line you're going to have a spooky encounter. It doesn't get me anxious anymore. Throughout the game, you can actually tell that it still wears its Garten of Banban inspiration very much on its sleeve, with references to Bird Up, which is a meme made by about Garten of Banban, but also, just by rewatching the recreation of Garten of Banban, you can see many of the lessons taken in that video carrying over.
Original game, I know what they're going for with the whole look of this playground. It's supposed to have these big, like, rubber plastic things that kids can climb on. I remember playing on that kind of stuff as a kid, but as I was doing some research into more liminal and creepy spaces, I kind of got settled, and I had this vivid memory of the play sets that you'd see at, like, McDonald's back in the day. They'd have these big pipes and like you'd have to crawl through them, and honestly they kind of scared me at times. I don't know if I'm like claustrophobic and I just don't know, but like something about being in there and like a kid comes up behind you, it's scary. So I decided to have my version of the playground focus more on the plot. But what if something bad happened in 2016? What if the entire facility was left abandoned in 2016 and the events of my game happened in 2023? This would mean that there would be 7 years between when the building shut down and when you're actually playing the game. So what if these little science experiments that were helping the kids and looking pretty were left alone in a facility with no food, scavenging for 7 years? Poor Jumbo Josh would be left in a dark room for 7 years. His body would begin melting away and deteriorating, but because he's not a natural life form.
The encounter with Lloyd was at first a little bit intimidating because Lloyd's model was actually kind of intimidating, but the actual encounter itself was so goofy that I didn't really find it that scary. But the Molly chase was really where the game hit its stride. Honestly, the fact that I didn't know for certain which way to go, which led to some critical mistakes leading to me to die a few times to Molly, was honestly really good. It felt like what the Huggy Wuggy chase in Poppy Playtime Chapter 1 should have been. Honestly, I really did enjoy that. It was definitely the peak of the experience for me horror-wise. And once again led to another funny Rambley moment where he tried to say, no, this is for staff only, realised what was happening, and then just immediately went, come in new staff. Oh my goodness. On the overall scale of did I find the game that scary? It's a little bit. Like, it had some moments that had me a little bit on edge. There were certainly some moments when things got just a little too quiet, and that's when I was actually able to, kind of get alone in my thoughts and really start to hype myself up more than anything. And the chase with Molly was equal parts exhilarating and scary, but I don't think the game ever reaches the heights that I feel like it could. But given that this is the game's free taster, I feel like the future chapters are really going to start to amp things up. And it has left me with enough questions that I am really curious to find out what happens from here on. Like, for instance, what is Rambley's intentions? Is he good? Is he some shade of grey where his intentions are good, but his behaviours certainly aren't? Is he actually secretly evil? Why are the mascots all shooting blood while Rambley is some digital program? Why is that the case? Like, if Molly can bleed, why is she still in the park? Like, stuff like that does have me wondering what's going on there. So will I be playing Chapter 2? Oh, almost certainly. I'll probably end up doing a follow-up review once a few of the chapters come out, just so that I can do a more overall perspective on the game. Also, visually, despite the fact that I did have to crank down the lighting so that OBS would be able to record it at a semi-stable frame rate, the game itself looks beautiful, and despite my earlier comment just then, I promise you, when I'm running the game myself, I can have those settings cranked up and the game runs pretty nicely. Like, it's a pretty friendly game in my opinion. Like, if it's running decently well on my old computer, that's a pretty good sign. Overall, do I recommend playing Indigo Park? Honestly, I do. Between the charm of the presentation and Rambley himself, alongside some pretty decent horror chases, I'm honestly curious to see where Indigo Park goes next. It feels like the best start any of these episodic horror mascot games have had in recent times. And so, if this is how it starts, I have to wonder what it's going to be like when things amp up. Like, if this is just the beginning, I wager that things are going to be really exciting in future chapters. Of course, we'll have to wait and see, but given that the game is free, I highly recommend you take a trip down to Indigo Park.